I want to bring in MS Now's Kevin Fry on Capitol Hill. Anthony Coley served as director of the Office of Public Affairs under President Biden and is an MS Now political analyst. Paul Butler is a former federal prosecutor and MS Now legal analyst. So I wonder what you make of what we heard today, Paul. This fund, we don't exactly know how it's going to operate. Seems like a lot of open questions for a huge amount of money.
Open questions about its constitutionality, important separation of powers concerns. The appropriation clause of the 14th, the appropriation clause says that Congress determines how federal taxpayer dollars are allocated. There's an argument here that the Trump administration is unilaterally creating a fund to hand out taxpayer money to its supporters with no congressional approval or oversight. There's also a really interesting kind of historical 14th Amendment concern, Chris. Section 4 of the 14th Amendment says that federal taxpayer money cannot go to anybody who, in paying an obligation or debt for insurrection or violence against the government.
So it says that specifically?
It does. Again, it was intended so that the people who rebelled in the Confederacy couldn't be rewarded. But it specifically says debts and obligations, which sounds like attorney's fees and any other concerns that January 6th defendants have, can't be paid for by the federal government under the Constitution.
Anthony Blanche did say at one point that the president and his family will not get a payout from the fund. But if the president's allies, supporters and donors can get paid, what questions does that raise?
It raises a lot of questions, Chris. And let me say this. I was in the room for most of this hearing today. The thing that struck me the most was the silence that came from Republicans on the rostrum. And Dr. King told us, I've been rereading a letter from a Birmingham jail and other historical documents. He reminded us that silence is complicity. And that's what I saw today. And if you go back and look at consequential moments in American history, take Watergate, for example, there were Democrats and Republican leaders who marched over to the White House to tell Richard Nixon that it was time for him to go. During the Reagan administration, for example, on the matter of Iran-Contra, there were Democrats and Republican committee chairs who called the Reagan administration on the carpet for that scandal. And even during the George W. Bush administration on matters with regard to wiretapping and torture, on the U.S. attorney scandal, you had Republican senators like John Cornyn and Lindsey Graham and Arlen Specter and John McCain. I mean, the list goes on. It's pretty long, Chris, of Republican members of Congress standing with Democrats when leaders of their party are doing things that are not consistent with the Constitution and American values. And it is that silence from Republican members of Congress right now that makes this moment so dangerous.
Since you were in the room, Anthony, take us inside. Did you sense any discomfort or hear anything that suggests discomfort about the idea of giving almost $2 billion in taxpayer money to people who may be friendly with the president of the United States?
No, and this is why I just don't understand it, Chris, for the life of me. When you led with Senator Coons's question, Senator Van Allen weighed in as well about this issue of law enforcement. People who attacked law enforcement on January 6th getting compensated out of this fund. I mean, whatever happened to Back the Blue? This is supposed to be an administration who is pro-law enforcement. But I hope every single law enforcement officer in this country sees this clip today, because it's further proof that this guy doesn't care about them. He doesn't care about, I mean, the American people are scratching their head right now. Why is this man focused on this issue and not their high gas prices and not their cost of living? And so, I mean, that's what I felt and others felt in the room today, in addition to just all the silence we're seeing from Republican senators.
So, Kevin, lawmakers also pressed Todd Blanche on how Trump might be involved in this process. What did we learn?
Right. So we know that when it comes to this fund, they're setting up, as part of the rules that were laid out by the DOJ in their document yesterday, a 5-member board. 4 of those would be appointed by the Attorney General. One additional one in consultation, they say, with Congress. But here's the notable phrase in here, that they can be removed by the president, who can remove any member without cause. Now, Blanche was pressed on how much involvement the president would have, despite that clause in the document. Here is what that exchange looked like.
Who are the commissioners?
They're not named yet.
Who will name them? I will, or the Attorney General will. It's not me.
So, with the suggestion of the President of the United States.
Excuse me?
With the suggestion of the President of the United States, your boss.
I do not make suggestions. I will.
No. He will make suggestions to you.
I have no idea if he will or not. I really don't. I have no idea if he will or not.
I would be shocked if he didn't tell you exactly who to put on, and I'd be more shocked if you did not put them on.
Of course, some of the Democratic misbelief that you're seeing there from Senator Jack Reed is that we know, of course, that Attorney General or Acting Attorney General Blanche is one of those being considered for the full-time job. So part of this, I think, stems from the Democratic point of view that they are like, well, if you're trying to get this job, of course you want to do what the president wants you to do. Also because the document lays out that for cause option where they can just essentially remove a member at their own volition. But this gets to the root of the concern we have seen from Democrats and even some Republicans since this was announced, which is essentially that this creates up a fund where the president can give out money through his folks that he is overseeing to anyone that he deems to be a victim of the last administration, including January 6 defendants. And so this kind of all goes back to that central kernel of concern from lawmakers.
Yeah, thank you for that. So, Paul, I do want to play what the president said because he was asked about who exactly might benefit from this fund. And here's what he said.
These were people that were weaponized and really treated brutally by a system that was so corrupt, with corrupt people running it, and they're getting reimbursed for their legal fees and the other things that they had to suffer.
Do you believe that people who committed violence against Capitol Hill police officers on January 6th should be eligible for compensation from this DOJ fund? And are you or your family members going to be seeking compensation from that fund?
It'll all be dependent on a committee. A committee's being set up of very talented people, very highly respected people. I think it's a committee of 5. And again, I didn't do this deal.
You heard him say a committee of 5. Math is not my strong suit, but let's say this. All you need is a quorum. A quorum is 3.
That's correct.
So there could be 3 in a meeting deciding who gets this money. It's a majority vote. That means potentially 2 people could be making decisions that ultimately amount to almost $2 billion.
2 people, maybe ultimately it's one person, one man, President Donald Trump, because in this deal, he gets to veto, he gets to fire any one of the 5 commissioners. So anyone who doesn't vote how he likes, we know what's going to happen to that person.
Anthony, what did you hear from Todd Blanche in terms of justification to explain to the American people why nearly $1.8 billion in taxpayer money should be used this way, especially now when we know what the American people are saying about how much they're hurting?
I didn't hear very much, and I want to go back. You played the Trump clip at the top. Chris, he talked about this in past tense, but I don't think we should think about this just as past tense. I think he is sending a message. He's creating a permission structure. He's sending a message to would-be criminals that if you commit a crime in my name, don't worry about it. I'll take care of it. I'll pardon you. I'll make you whole financially. And honestly, that should send a chilling message to every American who is pro-democracy and pro-constitution, because it comes at a time when this man, his back is against the wall because of his low approval ratings. And we're going into a midterm election where his party is about to lose control of one, and if not both houses of Congress. So that, to me, should be the takeaway about this. It's not just what happened in the past. He's creating this template for what could happen going forward, and calling really on a ragtag militia of people, just like we saw on January 6th, to turn over the will of the voters potentially in 2026.
Paul Blanche said today that what they are doing is almost identical to a fund that was done during the Obama administration. Is it almost identical?
No, and he, in fact, admitted at the hearing today that it wasn't almost identical, mainly because in a typical settlement agreement, it's a judge who oversees the settlement to make sure that everything is on the up and up. Here, the Trump administration did this really neat hat trick where they filed suit and then they dismissed the suit and they say, okay, we settled it. But after the judge dismissed the suit, they're saying the judge doesn't have any oversight over it. And to Anthony's point about the message that this sends, Chris, 1,000 people pled guilty in January 6 crimes. That means that they came to court and they admitted that there was proof beyond a reasonable doubt that they did what the government said that they did. An additional 250 were found guilty by a judge or a jury. Now, Trump, on his first day in office, pardoned 1,600 of those people. But Anthony's exactly right. The expressive message here is that people not only are getting away with crimes, they're being rewarded for crime.